Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I appreciate it. Could you take a second, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about, who you are, and we'll talk about like your parenting journey.
Okay, so my name is Megan Brannan. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old boy named Rory. Rory has autism and ARFID. Our story, I feel like, starts out like a lot of people do with speech delays. So we noticed between 15 and 18 months, like he wasn't babbling, he wasn't trying to form any words. So I brought up to our pediatrician, like I'm really concerned that we're not seeing any, even him trying to make any language. So he had continuous ear infections at that point, and her first go-to was, "Oh, it's probably the ear infections. He just can't hear. So let's do tubes. See how he does from there." So we did the tubes. We still weren't seeing any additional language, and I had brought it up multiple times. His pediatrician just kept telling me, he's a boy. We don't want to look into anything because it might just be that he is 2 and a boy, and we're just gonna wait and see. And I felt like she wasn't listening to me. So we ended up moving pediatricians, and that's when we started with Help Me Grow with speech. And that's kind of where we started, was with speech.
So just out of curiosity, like, when they said, "Oh, he's a boy, let's just wait," I don't understand what is the point of that?
I feel like I think that a lot of times people think that boys are late talkers, and so they say, "Oh, let's just wait and see because he might just be a late talker," and I just didn't see it that way.
Yeah, my youngest didn't speak until he was 4.5, and we were told that he would most likely be nonverbal. He wouldn't speak, and um, there were all kinds of challenges along the way with getting them diagnosed, because a lot of times it was always like it felt like it was, let's just wait a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, I mean, I understand the merit to that sometimes, but sometimes you just, like, as a parent, you just know that something's not right. Like, it's more than just missing a milestone. It's like, you just, as a parent, you have to, I think, trust your gut, which is what it sounds like you did. And
Well, and what when all this was happening, COVID hit, and a tree actually fell on our house. So we moved in with my parents while they were repairing our house. And my mom worked as a principal in the school districts, and so she's around a lot of kids. And she sat down with me and said, "Megan, I know you're really concerned about his speech delay, but I'm also noticing, like, he's not making eye contact. He's not responding to his name. He was constantly lining up all of his toys." And to me, he was my first kid. So I didn't know anything about autism. It wasn't anywhere on my radar. And so when she brought that up to me, I brought it up to our pediatrician. And that's when we started looking into autism.
well, that, I mean, that's a really good point too. I think 'cause sometimes parents feel like they should have picked up on things sooner, but I have 3 kids that were all diagnosed with autism, and I didn't recognize it in each of them, because when my oldest was diagnosed, I thought that's what autism was. And so then when my youngest was diagnosed, it was, okay, well, this must be autism too. Like, I didn't understand at the time that it was just such a broad spectrum of things. And then I totally missed my 18-year-old now. He was the last one diagnosed, but people think like, well, you had one, how did you not know about the others? Because they all presented very differently. So if you have no frame of reference, and even if you do have that frame of reference, it can be really hard to pick up on that stuff.
Right.
Especially too, if you have your pediatrician telling you to, like, let's just wait, let's just hold off, because then you kind of feel like you're crazy, or like you're just over, you know what I mean? Like, you're worried.
Overreacting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so when you went, like, you moved pediatricians, so you just found
Mm-hmm.
somebody and so what was that process after you did that? Because I think that's important for parents to understand that you can do that. Like, you don't have to be
Yeah.
stuck.
So our first pediatrician just wasn't listening. So we ended up moving to Akron Children's. And I mean, it seemed like I just had to be concerned for a second. And she just, like, immediately was on my team. But diagnosing autism is, the wait lists are such a hurdle. And I feel like that is so hard for parents to go through, that it just makes everything so much more frustrating than it really needs to be. We Rory had 3 ADOS tests done. His first ADOS test was done when he was about 2.5. We waited 6 months to get him into this clinic, and it was during COVID, so I was in a mask. The person that was administering the test was in a mask. Rory was completely nonverbal at that point. He was terrified, and we both left sweating and crying. And when I got the phone call with diagnostics, she said, again, he's 2. We want to wait. We don't ever want to give a child an autism diagnosis if that's not the fact. So right now we're just going to do it as a developmental delay and then refer you to come back in 12 to 18 months to get him retested. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, I'm so glad that you don't want to give him a label, when in reality, like, that was the biggest disservice she could have done for us. And it was, now looking back, it just like takes me over the edge just thinking about it. It's just like, I don't understand how giving somebody an autism label is going to be a negative in any way. It's only going to provide services.
Well, yeah, because in the system that we exist in, you have to have a label in order for insurance to start picking up the tab on things. And
right.
to pay out of pocket for this stuff is, I mean,
outrageous.
Yeah, unless you are like generational wealth, like you have a lot of money, and even then it can be a lot. And
right.
And you know, I don't understand. Like, I understand like not wanting to label kids. I mean, I get that, because you got the stigma and everything else, but like 12 to 18 months is a long time to wait, especially when you read about the importance of like early intervention. You can't get those early interventions until you have a diagnosis. Right. And so then you just like hurry up and wait.
Are stuck.
Yeah. And that's like just panic.
Yeah, that's pretty much. We ended up getting in for private speech, and we did Help Me Grow which Help Me Grow was virtual at the time because it was COVID, and it was horrific because you're trying to keep a 2-year-old in front of a screen with somebody he doesn't know. So that wasn't really much help, but Help Me Grow did help in the way of transferring us into the IEP for the school district and getting us the occupational therapy and the speech therapy and the intervention specialist. But we ended up, his speech therapy office did ADOS tests, and I was like, oh, this is perfect because it's going to be somewhere he's comfortable and it'll be good for him. But I didn't understand that speech therapists can run the testing, but they can't give a diagnosis. So when we got the paperwork back, he was in the range for a future autism diagnosis. And they were like, oh, well, you just take this to someone that can read the diagnostics and they can do the diagnosis off that. Well, nobody wants to do that.
Well, they want to do the testing themselves, right?
Right. So we ended up looking into Akron Children's. Their wait list was 12 to 18 months. And what we ended up doing was my mom reached out to one of her school psychologists, and they referred us to a clinic in Columbus, and they got us in and we got the diagnosis. But he didn't get his diagnosis until 5. We just got it in May of this year.
Oh, really? So it's that recent. How old is he now?
He's 5. He'll be 6 in October.
And so you recognize things like 15 months is when you started to get concerned. And the way the system is set up, it took you until he was 5, almost 6 to get the official diagnosis. That's crazy. And that's got to be so frustrating.
Yeah. And we had his ARFID diagnosis before we had his autism diagnosis, which I think is so like crazy to me, but it was a nightmare. It was awful.
How did you recognize the ARFID?
So Rory, when we were in all of this, we noticed that he would only eat 3 things. And if those 3 things if he wasn't able to get those 3 things, he wouldn't eat anything. And it was almost like he wasn't feeling hunger. So he would go all day. If you didn't make him stop and sit down, he would go all day without eating. And so I started getting concerned, brought it up to his pediatrician, and she put in a referral to Akron Children's feeding team. And we waited a year to get into his actual testing to be done. And then they noticed right off the bat, like, he is really rigid. He won't eat anything other than these things. He was getting headaches at the time because he wasn't eating enough. And so at night we would be up constantly with headaches. So they then referred us to food therapy.
My youngest went to feeding therapy because he had a difficult time swallowing for the longest time, and it turned out to be reflux related. Like we didn't know that at the time. But the feeding clinic is a pretty interesting place.
Yeah.
It is, and they do all kinds of stuff that can help kids. And I didn't really know anything about ARFID until this year. It was really the first time I'd started hearing about it, and I've done a couple episodes related to ARFID just because so many people now seem to be getting that diagnosis, with their kids.
Yeah.
So how is your son doing now?
So we have about 8 safe foods now, but he rotates them in like 3. So he'll only eat 3 different things at a time until he kind of like wears himself out. And then we'll pick up one of his other 8 safe foods and start over. But he is super limited in his food. If it's not available, he just won't eat. We're having a hard time right now at school because he is so overwhelmed with everything around him that he isn't eating enough. So we're working with his teacher. They've been keeping up watching to make sure that he is eating at least a little bit to see if we need to write that into his IEP as he needs to sit. I just don't want to take it away from him just sitting with his friends at lunch because that's like a time that he should enjoy. But if it is going to be an issue, continue to be an issue, we want to make sure that we look into it.
Yeah, I just did an episode a couple weeks back on back to school and how to like navigate some of that stuff.
I listened to that, and as soon as she brought up the IEP, I was like, "Oh man," because we were going into a meeting a couple days after that, so I brought it up then.
Yeah, so like when my kids were in grade school, my youngest especially, he was like 5 safe foods. That was about it, and even then, that was hit and miss because if like the chicken nuggets weren't exactly the same shape, he wouldn't touch them, or he could taste the difference between. What do they call them? Like a super taster or something where like he could taste the difference between like what came out
different
of what
brands.
bag. Yeah, different brands or the bags.
Mm-hmm.
If the bag changed color, like if they changed the labeling or something like that, he wouldn't touch it. And you couldn't just pour the new chicken nuggets into the old bag so he thought it was the bag because it tasted different to him. And it's so frustrating. And people don't understand. Like they would tell me, oh, he'll eat when he's hungry. Like he will starve. He will absolutely starve. If he is not eating Little Caesars pizza in his school lunch or like cold Little Caesars pizza at the time, which is even grosser, like I think, but like that's all he would eat for years was Little Caesars pizza.
Yeah. We have one of Rory's foods is salt and vinegar chips. That's like one of the ones that is like, I don't understand because it has such a strong smell and such a strong taste compared to everything else, but it has to be the same size bag. And he'll only eat it till it's halfway. And then once it hits halfway, he won't eat the rest. And I think it has to do with the size of the chips because they get smaller as you get to the bottom of the bag. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How did you differentiate between like sensory related food challenges and ARFID? Because I know there's a lot of parents out there who are dealing with like limited menus or difficulty, that kind of stuff. Like how in your experience, like how do you know when to get help? I guess if that makes sense.
So Rory's is sensory and anxiety based. So if he tries to put anything in his mouth that isn't a safe food, he'll immediately start gagging, which is one of the things that we are really struggling with to get him to try new things because he's so scared that he's going to gag on it. It's almost like he's gagging before he even gets it in his mouth. And even if he has like a smell from somebody else's plate, like a lot of times he can't eat around other people eating because he just can't stand the smell or the look of their food. Or even my one son was playing with slime the other day and it has like a really harsh smell to it, which I knew as soon as he got it out, I was like, this is a bad idea. But he was having fun and I didn't want to stop him. But Rory was trying to eat food and he was gagging and so we had to take the slime away and then he still was gagging because he could still smell it in the air. So we had to like wipe down the table, restart. It's so intense with, he's just so intense with anxiety when it comes to different foods that we just don't even have the opportunity a lot of times to get him to try new things. I will say food therapy, it's so painstakingly slow. It is so hard, but you learn so much from it, which is so beneficial. But they do give you really good ideas because right now we're just trying to get him to touch something that is similar to something that he'll eat. Like he loves Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So we're trying to find any food that is similar to Cinnamon Toast Crunch just to put on his plate so that he can see like, oh, this looks like what you're eating, but just a little different in shape, just to get him to really try it, and it's just difficult.
Yeah. Do you follow My ARFID Life?
I thought what was really, because I listened to her episode and I thought it was so interesting because her daughter can explain to her like why she doesn't want to try something or what is causing that anxiety. And I just wish, because Rory's verbal now, but his social pragmatic language, so like questions and like asking anything to elaborate, is just nowhere. But if I could just know like what you're thinking when we're trying to get you to try these different foods, I just would love to know that.
I wonder, well, and I guess I was curious. Like, I wonder if him watching her do that stuff and having her explain this stuff, like if it would feel like there's like an ally, not like, you know what I mean? Like somebody who gets it.
Yeah.
Like kids relate to kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because Michelle is Hannah's mom, and she was talking about how many people have connected with them and just said that like even just watching the videos has helped them to navigate the stuff in their lives. And I have a lot of stuff like with my kids where parents would have them watch, I don't know, something about dealing with anxiety or a lot of, because we have a lot of sensory related stuff here, so it's like how they deal with like offensive like microfiber stuff or whatever. And it was helpful for people to watch what they did because it gave them ideas, or it made them feel um like less alone. Like I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
we think kids experience things like that, but I think it has an impact. I was just
Yeah.
curious, because that's how I've learned the bulk of what I've learned about ARFID now was from their journey, and it's tough for
Mm-hmm.
sure, very tough. Do you find like the people in your life understand, or are they along the lines of like, well, if they're hungry they'll eat, or they're just picky eaters?
So we have some family that thinks if he'll eat when he's hungry, but my parents are all in when it comes to Rory. They actually retired when we started back at age 2, because they wanted to make sure that because we were in so many therapies, and thank goodness I work from home 2 days a week, so I would schedule all his therapies on the days that I worked from home. But my parents were always in to help me get him to and from. They constantly are listening to what I'm learning and taking that in, because they will watch him 2 days a week after his therapies are over. My dad will take him to the grocery store and they go through the fruit aisle and pick things up and smell them. And I have my family is great. It's been wonderful just watching them work with Rory, but we do have a lot of people that think, especially in the school system, when we were doing preschool with Rory, they didn't understand that you can't just give him the lunch that everybody else is eating. We need to send in his food to supplement that. But I also want you to give him that lunch so that he has the opportunity to try something if he were to want to. So it's hard because it seems so strange to some people, I'm just a pushover, I feel like, when in reality, this is what we are doing every day.
I used to give people this analogy when they would not maybe give me a hard time with my youngest, but like when they would just be like, oh, he'll eat when he's hungry, or he'll be fine. I mean, he was like 40 pounds for the longest time. I mean, he just would not gain weight. And I would tell them like, like how hungry would you have to be to eat out of the cat litter box? Like, as gross as that sounds, that's
Yeah.
absolutely offensive to every sense that you have, right? Nobody wants to just go in there and dig something out and eat it. For kids like ours that have sensory issues or have, feeding issues like ARFID, um, anything can be as offensive as that, and they're not going to want to eat it. And
Right.
there's like a serious anxiety um, around that. And I think people, and I think sometimes it's generational too. Like the older generation, I think, is like, well, when I was a kid, we would just do this. It's like, but we didn't know back then, and probably should have done
Right.
it then, and we definitely should not be doing it now. But it can be
Right.
very frustrating, and you can feel invalidated, and like it's hard to navigate those things when people aren't always on board.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't see the disability, like it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it sometimes. So I was just curious how that played out um, in your guys' life.
Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly having, whenever we start a new school, I feel like I got to give them the layout. Like, we got to do it this way. It's the only way that we can do it.
Do you like how are you guys doing? Like as parents, like how are you guys doing?
I we are doing okay. My husband is 100% on board with everything that I think we should do. So I think that's very helpful when you have someone
Hmm.
supporting you like that. It's been very stressful for me though, because you constantly feel like you need to get your kid into everything. Like you need to make sure you're doing everything you can for them. And I feel like the wait lists give you so much anxiety, and I feel like you constantly feel like you're not doing enough. When in reality, you're doing so much more than most parents need to do. But it's just like you want to know everything. You want to be everywhere. You want to make sure that they're getting the best things that they can.
And you know what, like the crazy part of that is like parents will tell me all the time how they feel like they're terrible parents because of they couldn't get this done or this done or this done. And here, like the reality is, I think if you are already doing more than what most people could even manage to do in a day, and you're still critical of yourself because you want better for your kids, what you're able to do, I think that's a pretty good sign that you're an amazing parent, right? Like we have these
Right.
unrealistic expectations of ourselves a lot of times, and uh, I mean, I've felt that. I've been doing this for 25 years now. My oldest is going to be 25. I have. There has almost never been a day that I have woken up and just made it through my day feeling like you know what, I'm a good parent. Like I did great today because I almost never feel that way unless I like intentionally reframe things
Yeah.
because it's so hard. Like we can only do so much, and the needs of our kids can exceed our like human limitations,
Hmm.
and it's very easy to get like pulled under because you feel
Yeah.
that way, you know?
You constantly feel like there's something else you need to be doing or looking into. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you balance everything out?
So I'm, it's very hard to just do it all, but I make sure that my work schedule goes around all of Roy's therapies. So I'm able to be there with him. And because I feel like the therapies aren't just for the child, it feels like it's for me too. I feel like I learn so much. I'm able to ask the questions and get the answers. It's so beneficial. So I've just made sure that I can work around whatever I need to make sure I'm always there, always learning, and just always making sure that I can do everything that I can for him if I can. So yeah, the flexible work schedule that came with COVID was a huge benefit. But that's mainly what we've been doing. My parents will do drop off and pickups if it's not something that I can be in. So that's been very helpful. But I mean, it's hard to do if you are working full time at an office. There's like no way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I've had people because like I've worked from home like my own business for a long time now, and it started out because it was just too much at the time, you know. Uh, and when I became a single dad and like a full time caregiver for all three of my kids, there was there was no. It's easy to go out and be like, "Hey, you just need to go out and get a job." It's not practical. Like it just isn't
Mm-hmm.
because there's 12 appointments a week that I have to get these guys back and forth to, plus school, plus my own stuff, plus like all the things that just pop up because how often
Right.
do your plans not go awry, right? Like something's always coming up, right?
Right.
And there's just no there's no predictability a lot of times, and what job is going to allow for that? Like it's so hard to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
if you found something that allows you that flexibility, that is absolutely amazing. And I wish more employers.
Oh my gosh, my boss is amazing. He says if it's something for Rory and it needs done, we'll figure it out. And I like could not be more thankful. Just like the stuff that has been given. I just don't know how I got what I got because it's been great.
That's awesome. I hear from a lot of parents who I think don't have that, or maybe they don't have the support, or their spouse isn't like on board with things, and I cannot tell you the impact that it makes when just both people are on the same page and they work
Yeah.
together. And even if you're co-parenting, like you're divorced or something, even if you can co-parent together and you work together as a team, like that makes all the difference in the world, because
Right.
this can feel so isolating, so exhausting, so overwhelming, so frustrating, and you can just burn out.
Yeah. Isolation is very hard. I feel like a lot of times it's just easier to not go somewhere than it is to just stay home and know you're comfortable. And I'm learning that we need to test the waters.
Yeah.
Like we need to see how it's going to go because I don't want him to miss out on opportunities, but it is very hard at the beginning with isolation.
I will say that 25 years into this, with my oldest just having moved out, one of the biggest lessons that I learned that I wish, like, if I could do it over again, I would do it differently, is exactly what you're talking about. Like, we wouldn't go places because I knew that they would become overstimulated and have a meltdown. And sometimes it was because I didn't want them to have to go through that. And there's other times where it's like, I am already like if you subscribe to like spoon theory, like I have one spoon left for like the rest of the week. And I know that if we go there, they're going to come home and we're going to have meltdowns for 3 days. And I just don't have it to do that. And there's like, you make decisions based on survival, I think a lot of times, and people don't understand that. But I wish that I would have allowed my kids more of those experiences and allowed the people in my life to experience those things earlier so that they had a better understanding and they could be supportive in ways that were like helpful, right? Because like I never
Right.
let anybody see that stuff. And so when they would try to help, wasn't always in a way that really like I needed, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not their fault because I didn't let them see any of those
Yeah.
things. And we got to let our kids experience stuff so that they can learn to navigate it. And I think it's great that you guys are doing that. Like I challenge my kids. I never push them beyond what they're capable of, but I always let's just go one step further and just see how this goes and allow
Yeah.
them to grow, because I would never have thought, 5 years ago when we were locked down in COVID, my oldest is immunocompromised. So we were 15 months in the house with no contact with other people. I would never have thought there would come a day where he would move out on his own. I didn't think it was possible. And he's out for like 3.5, almost 4 months now. And it's, I don't know. I think we find a way to help our
Yeah.
kids navigate this stuff. And it sounds like you guys are doing an amazing job. I know it
We're trying.
doesn't feel like it maybe, but you are.
Well, and I feel like I never realized how loud the world was until I had Rory. I say this all the time, like, why does everything have to be so loud? So I think we're starting to see the things that really affect him when we go to different places and trying to limit those areas or figure out ways to make it work in those areas. So yeah, trial and error.
Yeah. Like I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago, and I had no idea my whole life. And I didn't even know after all my kids were diagnosed with ADHD. And once I was diagnosed, like I recognized something was wrong and I got diagnosed, like it gave me this insight. Like now that I understood what was happening, like in my own head, it gave me insight and context in what my kids go through. And then it's like, oh, like I was so used to it that I didn't recognize it as being like a problem. Um, but it was a big problem in my life. I mean, it's like not having glasses and not realizing you can't see.
Right.
And then when you put them on, it's like, how did I live all my life like this? But I think it's awesome what you guys are doing, and I think that your kids are very lucky, because not all kids get that support.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know what we are very lucky. My son, the things that just fall into our lap that worked out so well for us just make such a difference.
Yeah. Well, and your kids are lucky to have you guys as parents too. You're allowed to say that. Like we're allowed to say it. Doesn't feel good to say that at first because it's
I
like, oh,
know.
but it's true. It really is
Yeah.
true. I've learned, all the things that I thought that I was doing bad on or struggling with or whatever. My youngest sat me down one time and he just wanted me to know that like I was actually doing a really good job, and he wants me to take better care of myself, and he wants me to have time to myself so that I can like not lose my mind or whatever.
Function.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we it's hard for us to see that because we love our kids so much, and we want them to have the best. And
Mm-hmm.
so just like from a parent who talks to a lot of parents, who's been doing this for a very long time, you guys are doing a great job.
I will do anything for Rory. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So pat yourself on the back every once in a while, because that helps us to kind of pick up and move on. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you guys are doing great. And I didn't realize you guys live so close.
Yes. I don't know.
You looked so familiar. Like I don't know if I've seen you at Akron Children's or something before, but like I was like, God, you look so familiar. And then you said, well, you live like in Northeast Ohio, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe like I don't know something. I know like I've seen you guys somewhere before, and I can't remember where it is.
Well, as soon as I saw the picture of the YMCA in the background, I was like, oh, I know that place.
Yeah, that's my sanity.
I know, me too. Every morning I'm up working out for an hour because it's like, that's my me time. I know I need it, and
it gets you through the day. Is there anything that you want to just tell parents that might be going through something like this? You know, how to, like, maybe they're feeling overwhelmed because they just got the diagnosis, or like, do you have any parting advice?
I mean, you're going to do what you need to do for your child, and they're going to love you for it. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to suck for a while, but there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. It might be a little light at a time, but I mean, seeing your child grow and seeing what they learn in the therapies, and it's just, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like such a great feeling. Well, as you see your child learn things, and the things that, I mean, Roy didn't talk until he was almost 4. And I remember when he started just saying a couple words, it was like the best feeling in the world. And I think that with autism, the milestones, when they hit them, it is just like unbelievable. And it makes you feel so good. And it'll be okay. Everything will work in the way it needs to.
Yeah. And you appreciate, I think we tend to appreciate things that maybe most people's lives, like they're so busy and whatever, that they don't always appreciate the little things. And like my kids have taught me to appreciate like all of the little things. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no victory that's too small for us to, celebrate. And
Yeah.
I think it's great advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I really appreciate it. Do you, I mean, and I'll cut this out if you don't want it, but like, do you want people to connect like on social media or anything like that to be able to find you?
I mean, that's fine.
Okay. How can people find you on social media?
So I'm on Instagram, at MEGBRAN, Meg Bran. That's it. So that's me.
That's really easy.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a clean one. That's nice. Nice, easy tag. Yeah.
I don't know how I did it, but
yeah, I mean, you got lucky because there's some weird ones out there.
I know.
I will, I'll have all that information in the show notes, and people will be able to connect and follow your journey, and you can connect with their parents, and that's kind of a cool thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I know. One of the moms that is from our school district, she actually reached out to me, and her son's in 2nd grade, and she told me all about the school district, and it was so helpful. It's so helpful when you find somebody within your area that is going through the same thing you are, because they are just able to give you so much information and some things that you never thought to even question or ask. And it's great to have somebody in your corner.
Very cool. Absolutely. Totally agree. Especially locally, because you can, like, you're navigating the same system, right? Like the same local agencies and stuff like that. So that's good. I like that. Well, thank you very, very much. And I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.